Okay, I believe all the board members are here for the meeting tonight. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start the meeting tonight with the policy committee, follow it with education, and then end with building. So I'd like to call the meeting of the policy committee to order for today, Thursday, October 8th, 2020. There are 7 policies that we will be going through. If the public has any comment on any of these policies, now is the time to make that comment. So this is for policies only. If there's anybody who would like to make comment, you can raise your hand now and we'll let you into the meeting. I don't see any going up. Mr. Parker, did you have any comments to make on the policy?
No comments.
Thank you very much. Then Dr. Brown, if you would like to get us started, we can go ahead and start going through the policies.
Yes, we'll move right into Ms. Pollock's presentation on an overview of where we're going with these policies and then the subsequent policies that we're asking for the board's permission to approve revisions. Ms. Pollock?
Hi, good evening. I need the ability to share my screen.
Go ahead now.
Thank you. So good evening. As a review, we engaged many of our stakeholders in a policy alignment process in order to update the policies that are in our student and family handbook. In September, we reviewed the tobacco and vapor products policy, student searches, substance abuse, acceptable use of internet, computers, and network resources. And in October, we discussed and reviewed the gang policy, suspension and expulsion, electronic devices, transportation, the video audio recording. And in November, we will review student expression, hazings, the student assistance plan, and the volunteer policy. As part of that stakeholder engagement process, we engaged a number of stakeholders in September and October in order to gather feedback on the policies. It went through the technology and operations department, also a staff working group that was developed, parent and family review committees, student review committees, the principals, academic team, the solicitor, cabinet, and also policy co-chairs. As part of the engagement meetings, there were 77 parents or family members that expressed an interest on being a part of the committees, 17 staff members that expressed interest, and 8 students. Out of the 77 parents, we had 4 meetings in September and 2 in October, and we had a total of 12 parents that attended. In September, we had 1 staff meeting, and in October, we also had 1 staff meeting, and we had a total of 16 staff members attend those 2 meetings in order to gather feedback. And then in September for students, we had a meeting. We did not have any students attend that meeting. We had a total of 8 that were invited. I was hoping to have more students at the last meeting, but we did have 1 student that attended from South Mountain and gave a lot of feedback, which I enjoyed, but we definitely want to look at how to further engage more students in this process. Dr. Brown, would you like?
We have policies tonight, don't we?
We do. Do you just want me to go into the policies?
Yes, ma'am, please, all of them.
Okay. So first we have policy 222, the tobacco and vapor products policy. And this policy, the title and terminology was revised to reflect tobacco and vaping products in general, not just tobacco. So if you notice in that first paragraph there under purpose, it includes language about and vaping products, including the product marked as Juul and other electronic cigarettes, student possession, use and purchase and sale of tobacco and vaping products, including Juuls and other electronic cigarettes. Under the definition section, it was updated based on how state law defines the term tobacco to broadly include vaping products like Juuls and other cigarettes. So there's a note prohibiting the possession of medical marijuana based on the guidance from the Department of Health. And in the authority section, it includes the purchase of vaping products as well, including the product marked as Juul and other e-cigarettes, regardless of whether such products contain tobacco or nicotine. It is prohibited on property owned or leased or controlled by the school district or its school-sponsored activities that are held off school property. It's included there that the board prohibits student possession or use of products marketed and sold as tobacco cessation products or for other therapeutic purposes except as authorized in the board's medication policy. So it also prohibits student possession of any form of medical marijuana at any time in any school building, on school buses or other vehicles that are owned, leased, or controlled by the school district, on property owned, leased, or controlled by the school district or its school-sponsored activities that are held off school property. It also notes that the board authorizes the confiscation and disposal of products prohibited by this policy. And again, under the delegation section, it includes vaping products. And also in the reporting section, the parent report to include the purchase or sale of a tobacco or vaping product, including a Juul or other e-cigarettes. The Office of Safe Schools report is noted there to also include the change with vaping products. And the law enforcement incident report includes the vaping products, which it specifically calls out the Juuls and other e-cigarettes. Under the guidelines section, a student who violates this policy shall be subject to prosecution initiated by the district, and if convicted, shall be required to pay a fine for the benefit of the district. In lieu of the imposition of a fine, the court may admit the student to an adjudication alternative. So tampering with devices installed to detect use of tobacco or vaping products shall be deemed a violation of this policy and subject to disciplinary action. That is the end of the updates for the tobacco and vapor products policy.
Are there any questions on this policy?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Just for the record, I just want to be clear to, I think we got 12 attendees. I don't know how much is real public, but at any rate, that this is the policy, and from policy comes regulations, which is actually created by the administration. So I just want the public to be clear on that. This is the policy, but then the regulations is actually the process and the steps that would express the way that certain things would actually be addressed. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conover. Are there any other questions or comments?
I just have one point. I was asked to look at these policies earlier, and it's a small one on this one, but it should be clear that that $50 fine is not something that we can impose, that we have to actually take that to court to get that. So I don't want there to be any misunderstanding about that.
Mr. Freund, there was a interruption. I only heard part of what you said. Do you mind repeating it?
No, not at all. A small point here. The way the policy was originally written, it's you could misinterpret it, or an administrator could misinterpret that the school had the ability to impose the $50 fine. That's not accurate. You have to actually prosecute that that case in court, and the court has to impose a fine. So I just want to make that clear, because if you just read it, you could get the impression that the school had the authority to do that, and that's not the case.
Would you recommend a revision?
I did. In fact, I've recommended a number of revisions to these policies. So you ought to be advised that.
And
Yeah.
just to be clear, absolutely, that is the process that the solicitor recommends, the revisions. However, our board book is posted prior to the revisions that were received. So the plan was to include those revisions after tonight, and Ms. Polick will be speaking to the revisions that she received on other policies. I think inadvertently she may have forgotten to include that, but we have every intention on including the solicitor's revisions because they're a part of the engagement process.
Terrific. Yeah, some of them are minor, some of them are
Yeah.
more important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Lee.
And thank you, Mr. Freund,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
as well, Dr. Brown.
You're welcome.
The next policy is policy 226, searches policy, the student searches. That policy, much of that policy, there is a lot of new language in this policy. The title of the policy, searches, has been updated to broaden its application to various kinds of searches that have been the subject of litigation. And PSBA replaced most of the policy with language that's more current and comprehensive. And it also provides more comprehensive guidance reflecting court-established standards applicable to searches for students' persons and other belongings based on individualized reasonable suspicion. So you can see the purpose was updated to include to respect the rights of students to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures while fulfilling the district's interest in protecting and preserving the health, safety, and welfare of the school population, enforcing rules of conduct, and maintaining an appropriate atmosphere conducive to learning. Under the authorities section, school officials have the authority to lawfully search students or their belongings, including lockers, automobiles, electronic devices, purses, backpacks, clothing, and other possessions without a warrant when in school, on school ground, or when otherwise under school supervision, if there is a reasonable suspicion that the place or thing to be searched contains prohibited contraband, material that would pose a threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the school population, or evidence that there has been a violation of the law, board policy, or school rules. The scope and extent of searches must be reasonable in relation to the nature of the suspected evidence, contraband, or dangerous material, and to the grounds of suspecting that it may be found in the place or thing being searched. So the district has a compelling interest in protecting and preserving the health, safety, and welfare of the school population, which under certain circumstances may warrant general or random searches of students and their lockers, vehicles, or other belongings without individualized suspicion for the purpose of finding or preventing entry onto school property of controlled substances, weapons, or other dangerous materials. Under the delegation of responsibility section, it was included that searches authorizes the administration to conduct searches of students or their belongings, including lockers, and now includes automobiles, electronic devices, purses, backpacks, clothing, and other possessions in accordance with the standards set forth in this policy. Also added that in consultation with the district solicitor, the policy shall develop guidelines. So those are the administrative guidelines that Ms. Conover referenced. And procedures to implement this policy, and shall ensure that school staff who are involved in carrying out searches or determining when searches will be conducted receive appropriate periodic training about such procedures and currently applicable legal standards. Under the guidelines section, this entire section is new. Students or I should say the language is new in this section. Students or their belongings, including lockers, automobiles, electronic devices, backpacks, clothing, and other possessions may be searched without a warrant when in school, on school grounds, or when otherwise under school supervision, if there is a reasonable suspicion that the place or thing to be searched contains prohibited contraband, material that would pose a threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the school population, or evidence that there has been a violation of the law, board policy, or school rules. The scope and extent of searches must be reasonable in relation to the nature of the suspected evidence, contraband, or dangerous material, and to the grounds for suspecting that it may be found in the place or thing being searched. So in determining whether reasonable suspicion exists, the principal or designee always should be able to articulate what's being looked for and why it's thought to be located in that particular place to be searched. The scope of the search should be limited to the place or places the item sought is believed to be. Examination by school staff of text messages, call logs, files, images, or other data contained in a student's mobile telephone or other devices without the student's consent normally constitutes a search that must be justified by reasonable suspicion that material in violation of the law, district policy, or school rules, or evidence of such a violation is contained in the particular files, directories, or other data locations being examined in the device. So this next section also reflects a number of decisions from the PA Supreme Court. So under certain circumstances, random or general searches of students and their belongings, including student lockers or vehicles parked on school property, may be conducted during the school day or upon entry into school buildings or school activities in the absence of suspicion focused on a particular student or students for the purpose of finding or preventing entry onto school property or activities of controlled substances, weapons, or other dangerous materials. Such searches normally will be conducted in a minimally intrusive manner using screening methods such as dogs or other animals trained to detect controlled substances, explosives, or other harmful materials by smell, as well as metal detectors and other technology. When such screening methods provide a reasonable suspicion that particular students, items, or places possess or contain controlled substances, weapons, or other dangerous materials, screening may be followed by physical searches or those particular students, items, or places on an individualized basis. Random or general searches for weapons may be conducted when there are circumstances, information, or events tending to indicate increased likelihood that students may be armed or headed for physical confrontation because of community strife or tensions, or as a continuation or escalation of a prior incident in or out of school, which threatens to spill over into school, into a school-sponsored activity, or into other times and places that students are under school supervision. Random or general searches for controlled substances may be conducted when there are circumstances, events, or information tending to indicate significant drug use, possession, or trafficking among students in school. So random or general searches not based on individualized suspicion must be approved in advance by the superintendent or designee in consultation with the district solicitor. Coordination with law enforcement officials will be accomplished as provided in the memorandum of understanding with the applicable law enforcement agency. So in the section searches upon consent, searches may be conducted at any time with or without reasonable suspicion if the student has given knowing and voluntary consent specific to the place to be searched. So the administration may establish rules and procedures governing certain privileges enjoyed by students, such as the privilege of parking a vehicle on school grounds, that make the student's consent to random searches or inspections a condition of access to the privilege. Searches by or at the request of law enforcement officials. The legal standards governing searches initiated by school officials are less strict than the standards applicable to law enforcement authorities in many situations. When searches of students, student belongings, vehicles, or lockers are conducted by or at the request of law enforcement officials, with or without the involvement of school staff, the law enforcement officials are solely responsible for ensuring that a warrant has been issued or that the circumstances otherwise permit the search to be lawfully conducted in accordance with the standards applicable to law enforcement actions. School staff will not interfere with or obstruct searches initiated by law enforcement, but may assist when law enforcement officials have requested such assistance and have represented that a warrant has been issued or that they otherwise have a proper authority for a lawful search. Inspections was included to the section of locker searches, so locker inspections and searches. Lockers are assigned to and otherwise made available to students as a convenience was added, that school materials and limited personal property, and to facilitate movement between classes and activities to and from school. Such lockers are and shall remain the property of the school district, and to the extent students have any expectation of privacy of lockers at all, it is very limited. In this next paragraph, no student may place or keep in a locker any substance or object that is prohibited by law, board policy, or school rules, or that constitutes a threat to the health, safety, or welfare of the occupants of the school building or the building itself. So students are required to ensure that their lockers do not contain spoiled food items or beverages or soiled clothing, which may attract pests, create odors, or cause unhealthy conditions. A student locker may be opened and inspected for cleanliness with or without the consent of the student. Whenever there are odors, pests, or other indications that a locker contains spoiled food, soiled clothing in need of laundering, or similarly unhealthy matter. In the next paragraph, it was added that students would be exclusively responsible for locking their assigned lockers to ensure the security of their personal belongings and school property entrusted to them. In the next paragraph, and the word inspection was added to the student to whom the locker is assigned, and reasonable was added to opportunity. And then at the end there, student lockers may be searched without prior notice to the student. So the principal or designated staff person shall be present whenever a student locker is inspected for cleanliness or is searched. The principal or designee shall maintain written records of all occasions when a locker is searched or inspected. Such records shall include the reasons for the search, persons present, objects found, and their disposition. Searches involving removal of clothing or examination beneath clothing, and this is one that Mr. Freund gave feedback on. So searches of students involving the removal of undergarments or examination beneath undergarments are subject to stricter standards than are required to justify other searches of a student's person or belongings. Such searches are permitted only when the basis for suspicion establishes either that the reasons for believing that the items being searched for are concealed specifically inside undergarments are stronger reasons than grounds that would support only a more general, reasonable suspicion that the student is in possession of the items or has them somewhere on the student's person, or that the quantity or nature of the item being sought present a higher level of danger to the school population than other kinds of contraband. So searches involving the removal of or examination beneath any clothing of a student other than jackets, coats, or other outerwear shall be conducted only by a staff member of the same gender as the student, with at least one other staff person of the same gender present as a witness, and in location assuring privacy from observation by persons not involved in the search or of the opposite sex. Searches involving the removal of undergarments or examination beneath undergarments will be conducted only after consultation with the district solicitor. Handling and disposal of items found in the course of searches. So any item or material found during a search or inspection, the student's possession of which is in violation of law, district policy, or school rules, or otherwise is evidence of such a violation, may be confiscated and used as evidence in student discipline proceedings or criminal investigation, even if such items or material were not the original objective of the search or inspection. So the principal would be responsible to ensure that confiscated items or material or property are properly inventoried and secured until the conclusion of disciplinary action, if any, and are then properly disposed of if not appropriate to be returned to the student. Items or materials that are evidence of a criminal offense or that are not lawful for ordinary citizens to possess will be promptly turned over to proper law enforcement authorities for custody or disposal. I just need 1 second to pull up. So for policy 226, again, one of Freund's recommendations was just that we make sure that we're following through with our administrative regs, and that under random or general searches, it provides that smell can constitute a reasonable suspicion for search. So we just need to look at that. It may be okay for school context, but he would like to review that particular sentence. And also in the last paragraph, the statement of the law and inappropriately random and general statements he wanted to review, and just The section on strip searches, it offers a misleading description of the law. And he thinks that we should review the wording there. Any questions or comments for that particular policy?
Johnson Watts, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just on the points regarding automobiles and vehicles, if it could just be really clear or clarified. I don't know why we use vehicle in one situation and automobile in another. And I'm not sure if this applies to a child who walks 2 blocks to the school within the 15-mile-per-hour zone and parked somewhere in that vicinity. And does that leave that car subject to this policy or not? And just if this execution of the regs by administration, will it be consistent throughout all schools so that someone says, well, I go to so-and-so and we don't do this there. But someone at another school, same age range, says, well, that's what we do here. That's my
Carol,
question.
I can help a little bit. The automobile must be on school property for this to apply. So if it's parked in the street, we really can't, we don't have any authority over it.
Okay. And then in terms of that inspection, is once it's being executed by the administration into the buildings, will it be consistent across all buildings so that there isn't this kind of conversation of students, this is what we do here, well, no one does that to us here. You hear where I'm coming from?
Yes, and if I may, that is the purpose of administrative regulations, to standardize the behavior of our leaders and our staff in the buildings. So as we move to develop those and communicate those out, they inform practice and implementation. And as I said before, standardize the practice and behavior that we need to support the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Vega, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, I have questions about the undergarments. So can you please explain to me or clarify to me what that means? Because someone reading this can say, you can tell me to remove my underwear. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, maybe I can help here a little bit, Ms. Vega. That's one of the things that I picked out. Let me just say this, that I think that Dr. Brown and Ms. Pollock have done a really yeoman's job in putting together revisions to these policies. One of the things that is difficult here is that things in the law change constantly. And there are 2 or 3 cases, some of which I was involved in, others I was familiar with, but cases that have just come down within the last few months that affect some of this. One of those is the Wayne Highland case in which I was involved. It's a federal case, and that discusses this whole underwear situation. So the way it's written now, I was very concerned that someone, an administrator, might be misled, get themselves into trouble, thinking that, as long as they didn't remove a kid's underwear, it was okay. The law is not quite that definitive. In fact, in the Wayne Highlands case, that was one of the questions. So the question is that you reach a higher standard of reasonable suspicion. Whoops. It's a clock. Sorry about that. I forgot about the clock. Yeah, I tried to turn that clock off the other day and I couldn't figure out how to do it. But anyway, so the test is when the search would expose intimate parts. That's the language that the cases use. So it doesn't necessarily, and there's also, in determining what that is, other factors come into play, like the age of the student, the gender of the student, that kind of thing. So we need to tweak up that language a little bit so no one is misled that you can say you can do anything as long as the underwear is in place. Does that help at all? Sorry about the clock.
So I have more questions. Thanks, Freund. So searches of students involving the removal of undergarments or examination beneath undergarments. I mean, are you changing that whole complete sentence? Because that's telling me that you can remove the undergarments of my child.
We will be
Well,
changing.
Yeah, that whole section is going to get changed. I mean, could you do that depending on the circumstances? That whole section needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
So
And let me just jump in. As a district, we don't engage in those as far as I'm aware. And here's where we would need you to confirm, Mr. Freund. We don't engage in those type of searches.
then
Yeah.
it shouldn't be in here though. If you don't engage in it, it shouldn't be in here, because this is concerning. If it's critical to that level, then the police should be involved and the police should be doing whatever searches they need to do. I don't think that any school official is qualified to remove undergarments of any child.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, Linda, that would only be, and that would only be an extraordinarily rare case where somebody had something hidden in underwear that posed an immediate danger, like a gun or something like that. I mean, it would be very extreme. And Dr.
Yeah,
Brown is right. That is something that is a very last resort. And that's what I want to make clear here, that it's not just a removal of underwear. It's an exposure of intimate parts, and what is intimate depends on the circumstances. So we're going to tweak that language so that I think you'll be more comfortable with it, and it'll better reflect what the law is and give better protection to the administrators who have to implement these policies.
Okay, I'm really curious to see how it's going to get tweaked, because that one's a huge no. Now, did I misunderstand earlier? Did you say that parents were part of a panel that voted on some of these things, or did I misunderstand?
No, you were correct, Linda. I had a number of parent meetings where they were able to, I sent the policies to them via email. I also sent them translated in Spanish, and then we met via Zoom to discuss their questions, concerns, and feedback to the policies. And the families that couldn't attend, some that couldn't attend, were able to provide feedback through email.
And how many families provided feedback? You said, I know it was like a low number, right?
It was a low number. And I'd have to, it was 12.
12, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm concerned about this section. I think the rest is great. I mean, you guys did a phenomenal job, but this section is really scary at reading it. I know that you guys are going to tweak it, but if it's going to be like some kind of extreme type of situation where there's a shooting or something like that, then it needs to be worded that way, because any other, if it's not worded specifically, this is saying that you can, because you want to conduct a search, you can search under my kids' undergarments.
Linda, when we're finished with this, I'll work with Ms. Polak and Dr. Brown, and I think that you will be more comfortable when you see the final product.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys listening.
No, you're absolutely right. It's an absolutely important concern.
Any other questions or comments for that policy?
Yes, Ms. Conover's hand is up.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Freund. I just from listening, I'm on the policy committee, by the way. Just from listening, there are some changes that I think that we are aware of that it has to be changed. But the reason why I initially raised my hand was because I had a question in regards to the a policy that addresses foul play.
This is what?
Foul play.
Oh.
And I'm
okay.
not sure. You're right. So what would that be a separate policy, or is that something that would actually be written in the regs, aka process?
I think we'd have to understand the use of the term foul play.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you an example. And I'm not against anyone, but we know in this world that we live in, things happen. You doing car searches, something's planted in the car. You have a student who may be playing with another kid, and it's harmless, but maybe a teacher, administrator, person who has authority sees it as an opportunity to say that they see something that they didn't actually see. I want to know what happens when allegations are unfounded.
No.
Foul play.
Okay. Thank you for that. I guess once we have a chance to converse a bit deeper with the solicitor on that, he'll guide us on whether that's a policy or a piece of the reg, and we'll definitely circle back to the committee and share the changes and updates with the full board as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next policy is policy 227, which is the controlled substances policy. So this policy has some minor content updates for better clarity. In the purpose section, they added the word shall. Under the definition section, it was revised for controlled substances, lookalike drugs, and lookalike drugs in accordance with the law. So down at the bottom there for number 8 in the definition section, non-prescription over-the-counter medications was added. And then for the purposes of this policy, lookalike drug shall include any pill, capsule, tablet, powder, plant matter, or other item or substance that is designed or intended to resemble a controlled substance prohibited by this policy, or is used in a manner likely to include others to believe the material is a controlled substance. Under the authority section, the last paragraph, the disability information was updated in accordance with the law as well. So to include a student for whom an evaluation is pending, the district shall take all steps required to comply with state and federal laws and regulations, the procedures set forth in the memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement and board policies. For off-campus activities, it was updated due to recent court cases. So the policy shall also apply to student conduct that occurs off school property and would otherwise violate the code of conduct if any of the following circumstances exist. And number 1, the conduct occurs during the time the student is traveling to and from school or traveling to and from school-sponsored activities, whether or not via school district furnished transportation. The word activity and such activities were added to number 2. Student expression was added to number 3. And in number 4, for example, a transaction conducted outside of school pursuant to an agreement made in school that would violate the code of conduct if conducted in school. And number 6, there's otherwise a nexus between the proximity or timing of the conduct in relation to the student's attendance at school or school-sponsored activities. Under delegation of responsibility, the language of developing administrative regulations was added. And in number 1, establishing procedures to appropriately manage situations involving students suspected of using, possessing, being under the influence, or distributing controlled substances. And in number 2, the administrative regulations language was added. In number 4, the term convicted of. So establish procedures for education and readmission to school of students convicted of offenses involving controlled substances. Violations of this policy may result in disciplinary action up to and including expulsion and referral for prosecution. If you go 2 paragraphs down there, the beginning of that sentence was added. In accordance with state law, the superintendent shall annually by July 31st report all incidents of possession, use, or sale of controlled substances to the Office for Safe Schools. The word shall was added there in the last sentence of that section. And in the section for anabolic steroids, in the second sentence, bodybuilding materials and muscle enhancement, increasing muscle bulk or strength was added. That is the end of the changes for policy 227. Do you have any questions or comments?
Any hands raised?
You said you don't. Okay,
No,
thank you.
you can go on.
Okay, next, Takesha Saylor will present the acceptable use of internet computers and network resources policy.
Thank you. The acceptable use of internet and computers and network resources policy begins with modifications to the language in the purpose section. The board supports the use of the computers, internet, and other network resources in the district's instructional and operational programs in order to facilitate learning, teaching, and daily operations through interpersonal communications and access to information, research, and collaboration. The next paragraph is updated to add, the district provides students, staff, and other authorized individuals with access to the district's computers, electronic communication systems, and network, which includes internet access, whether wired or wireless, or by any other means. The last paragraph in the purpose section has language that states, for instructional purposes, the use of network facilities shall be consistent with the curriculum adopted by the district, as well as the verified instructional needs, learning styles, abilities, and developmental levels of students. In the definition section, language specific to child pornography, where it says the term child pornography is defined under both federal and state law. The word is added in reference to any visual depictions. And in the child pornography section, the word state and is added in terms of its applicability to the law, and components such as books, magazines, pamphlets, slides, photograph, film, videotape, computer depiction, or other material depicting a child under the age of 18. There's additional language that specifies references to minors. It says the term harmful to minors is defined under both federal and state law. The word is added in reference to a picture, anything harmful to minors. In the harmful to minors section further down, specific reference to state law is referenced here in accordance with any depiction or representation in whatever form of nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or misogynistic abuse. In the authority section, the language added here says the availability of access to electronic information does not imply endorsement by the district of the content, nor does the district guarantee the accuracy of information received. The district shall not be responsible for any information that may be lost, damaged, or unavailable when using the network, or for any information that is retrieved via the internet. The district shall not be responsible for any unauthorized charges or fees resulting from access to the internet or other network resources. Further in this paragraph, language was added to include the district's computer and network resources are the property of the district. Specifications on users that shall have no expectation of privacy in anything they create, store, send, delete, receive, or display on or over the district's computer information systems, including personal files or any use of the district's CIS systems. The district reserves the right to monitor, track, and log network access and use, or monitor files server space utilization by district users. The word shall and the word the were added in association with the extent legally required with the internet service provider. Further down, we have references that for the requirements, all users to fully comply with this policy and to immediately report any violations or suspicious activities to the superintendent or designee. The board establishes the following materials in addition to those stated in law and defined in this policy that are inappropriate for access by minors. They include anything that is defamatory, lewd, vulgar, or profane, anything that is threatening, harassing, or discriminatory, bullying, or terroristic. The last paragraph here adds language in association with the established board policy and or the use of software and or online server blocking. Access to filters, or specifically the district operates in and enforces a technology protection measure that blocks or filters access to inappropriate matter by minors on its computers used and accessible to adults and students. The technology protection measure shall be enforced during use of computers and internet access. Upon request by students and staff, the superintendent or designee shall expedite a review and may authorize the disabling of internet blocking or filtering software to enable access to material that is blocked through technology protection measures, but is not prohibited by this policy. Upon request by students and or staff, building administrators may authorize a temporary disabling of internet blocking or filtering software to enable access for bona fide research or other lawful purposes. Written permission from the parent or guardian is required prior to disabling internet blocking filtering software for a student's use. If a request for temporary disabling of internet blocking or filtering software is denied, the requesting student or staff member may appeal the denial to the superintendent or designee for expedited review. Under the delegation of responsibility section, the addition language that states the district shall make every effort to ensure that this resource is used responsibly by students and staff. The district shall inform staff, students, parents, guardians, and any other users about this policy through employee and student handbooks posted on the district website and by other appropriate methods. A copy of this policy shall be provided to parents, guardians upon written request. Users of district networks or district-owned equipment shall, prior to being given access or being issued equipment, sign user agreements acknowledging awareness of the provisions of this policy and awareness that the district uses monitoring systems to monitor and detect inappropriate use. Student user agreements shall also be signed by a parent or guardian. Administrators, teachers, and staff have a professional responsibility to work together to help students develop the intellectual skills necessary to discern among information sources, to identify information appropriate to their age and developmental levels, and to evaluate and use the information to meet their educational goals. Students, staff, and other authorized individuals have the responsibility to respect and protect the rights of every other user in the district and on the internet. Building administrators shall make initial determinations of whether inappropriate use has occurred. The superintendent or designee shall be responsible for recommending technology and developing procedures used to determine whether the district's computers are being used for purposes prohibited by law or for accessing sexually explicit materials. The procedures shall include, but not be limited to, utilizing a technology protection measure that blocks or filters internet access for minors and adults to certain visual depictions that are obscene, child pornography, harmful to minors with respect to use by minors, or determined inappropriate for use by minors by the board. Maintaining and securing a usage log, monitoring online activities of minors. The next sentence includes language that says that the superintendent or designee shall develop and implement administrative regulations that ensure students are educated on network etiquette and other appropriate online behavior, including interaction with other individuals on social networking websites and in chat rooms, cyberbullying awareness and response. In the guidelines section, language is now included, which states that network accounts shall be used only by the authorized owner of the account for its approved purpose. Network users shall respect the privacy of other users on the system. In the safety section, it is the district's goal to protect users of the network from harassment and unwanted or unsolicited electronic communications. Any network user who receives threatening or unwelcome electronic communications or inadvertently visits or accesses an inappropriate site shall report such immediately to a teacher or administrator. Network users shall not reveal personal information to other users on the network, including chat rooms, emails, social networking, websites, etc. Internet safety measures shall effectively address the following: control of access by minors to inappropriate matter on the internet and World Wide Web, safety and security of minors when using electronic mail, chat room, and other forms of direct electronic communications, prevention of unauthorized online access by minors, including hacking and other unlawful activities, unauthorized disclosure, use, and dissemination of personal information regarding minors, restriction of minors' access to materials harmful to them. In the prohibition section, users are expected to act in a reasonable, ethical, and legal manner in accordance with district policy, accepted rules of network etiquette, and federal and state law. Specifically, the following uses are prohibited: facilitating illegal activity, commercial or for-profit purposes, non-work or non-school related work, product advertisement or political lobbying, bullying, cyberbullying, hate mail, discriminatory remarks, and offensive or inflammatory communication, unauthorized or illegal installation, distribution, reproduction, or use of copyrighted materials, accessing, sending, receiving, transferring, viewing, sharing, or downloading obscene, pornographic, lewd, or otherwise illegal materials, images, or photographs. Access by students and minors to material that is harmful to minors or is determined inappropriate for minors in accordance with the board policy. Inappropriate language or profanity. Transmission of material likely to be offensive or objectionable to recipients. Intentional obtaining or modifying of files, passwords, and data belonging to other users. Impersonation of another user, anonymity, and pseudonyms. Fraudulent copying, communications, or modification to materials in violation of copyright laws. Loading or using of unauthorized games, programs, files, or other electronic media. Disruption of the work of other users. Destruction, modification, abuse, or unauthorized access to network hardware, software, and files. Accessing the internet, district computers, or other network resources without authorization. Disabling or bypassing the internet blocking, filtering software without authorization, accessing, sending, receiving, transferring, viewing, sharing, or downloading confidential information without authorization. In the security section, we have language which states system security is protected through the use of passwords. Failure to adequately protect or update passwords could result in unauthorized access to personal or district files. To protect the integrity of the system, these guidelines shall be followed. Employees and students shall not reveal their passwords to another individual. Users are not to use a computer that has been logged in under another student's or employee's name. Any user identified as a security risk or having a history of problems with other computer systems may be denied access to the network. In the copyright section, it states it's illegal. The illegal use of copyrighted materials is prohibited. Any data uploaded to or downloaded from the network shall be subject to fair use guidelines and applicable laws and regulations. Pertaining to the district website, we have language that says it shall establish, it shall develop. All users publishing content on the district website shall comply with this policy and other applicable district policies. Users shall not copy or download information from the district website and disseminate such information on unauthorized web pages without authorization from the building principal. In the consequences for inappropriate use section, we have language that states the network user shall be responsible for damages to the equipment, systems, and software resulting from deliberate or willful acts, illegal use of the network, intentional deletion or damage of files or data belonging to others, copyright violations, and theft of services shall be reported to the appropriate legal authorities for possible prosecution. The next sentence includes language which references the CIS systems in addition to the stipulations of this policy. Vandalism shall result in loss of access privileges, disciplinary action, and/or legal proceedings. Vandalism is defined as any malicious attempt to harm or destroy data of another user, internet, or other networks. This includes, but is not limited to, uploading or creating computer viruses. Failure to comply with this policy or inappropriate use of the internet, district network, or computers shall result in usage restrictions, loss of access privileges, disciplinary action, and/or legal proceedings. That concludes the modifications or updates to policy 815. Are there any questions?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the next policy is policy 233, suspension and expulsion. So this policy includes minor content updates for better clarity and organization. PSBA deleted language on incidents with a student with a disability and imposing suspension and expulsion, with the recommendation that the topic would be more effectively addressed in draft policy 113, which is discipline of students with disabilities. And Mr. Freund has also given some feedback in better defining the section on disability. The first section under purpose, the board was added to that particular paragraph. Under guidelines in the second paragraph, school population is threatened, so the word population was added. And a sentence was added at the end there to include informal hearings under this provision shall be conducted by the building principal. Under the exclusion from class section in school suspension, the building principal was added. Under the expulsion section, the board may permanently expel from the district rolls any student whose misconduct or disobedience warrants this sanction. And then that concludes the updates for policy 233. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Next, Takesha Saylor will do policy 237, electronic devices.
Thank you. This section, this policy contains updates at the purpose section, which states the board adopts this policy in order to maintain an educational environment that is safe and secure for district students and employees. In the definition section, electronic devices shall include all devices that can take photographs, record audio or video data, store, transmit, or receive messages or images, or provide a wireless, unfiltered connection to the internet. Examples of these electronic devices include, but shall not be limited to, radios, Walkman, CD players, iPods, MP3 players, DVD players, handheld game consoles, personal digital assistants, also known as PDAs, cellular telephones, Blackberries, and laptop computers, as well as any new technology developed with similar capabilities. In the authority section, the inclusion of the use of electronic devices is added, as well as language pertaining to on-district property, on-district buses and vehicles during the time students are under the supervision of the district, and in locker rooms, bathrooms, health suites, and other changing areas at any time. The board prohibits possession of laser pointers and attachments, references to telephone paging devices, beepers by students in the district buildings or on district property, and at school-sponsored events. In the electronic images and photographs section, the board prohibits the taking, storing, disseminating, transferring, viewing, or sharing of obscene, pornographic, lewd, or otherwise illegal images or photographs, whether by electronic data transfer, or other means, including but not limited to texting and emailing. Because such violations may constitute a crime under state and/or federal law, the district may report such conduct to state and/or federal law enforcement agencies. The off-campus activities section is now included, and it states that the policy shall also apply to student conduct that occurs off school property and would otherwise violate the code of student conduct if any of the following circumstances exist. The conduct occurs during the time the student is traveling to and from school or traveling to and from school-sponsored activities, whether or not via school district furnished transportation. The student is a member of an extracurricular activity and has been notified that particular off-campus conduct could result in exclusion from such activities. The student is a member of an student expression or conduct materially and substantially disrupts the operation of the school or the administration if reasonably anticipates that the expression or conduct is likely to materially or substantially disrupt the operations of the school. The conduct has a direct nexus to attendance at school or a school-sponsored activity. For example, a transaction conducted outside of school pursuant to an agreement made in school that would violate the code of student conduct if conducted in school. The conduct involves the theft or vandalism of school property. There is otherwise a nexus between the proximity or timing of the conduct in relation to the student's attendance at school or school-sponsored activities. In the delegation of responsibility section, there's a reference to employees and language that specifies the board's electronic device policy reference. It also states that the superintendent or designee shall develop administrative regulations to implement this policy. In the guidelines section, violations of this policy by a student shall result in disciplinary action and shall result in confiscation of the electronic device. Exceptions, and the exception section now includes the building administrator may grant approval for possession and use of an electronic device by a student for the following reasons. 1, health, safety, or emergency reasons, and individualized education program. 3, the addition of language pertaining to classroom or instruction related activities, as well as other reasons determined appropriate by the building principal. The building administrator may grant approval for possession and use of a telephone paging device beeper by a student for the following reasons. 1, a student is a member of a volunteer fire company, ambulance, or rescue squad. And here in number 2, we have reference to the medical condition of an immediate family member's needs. And that concludes the updates to policy 237. As I understand it, the solicitor has provided us with some additional information in accordance with it. One point of reference with was the definition of electronic images and photographs. He states that it's an overbroad and may apply to outlaw constitutional protected speech or materials. We would potentially need a more carefully crafted definition. He references numbers 2, 3, and 4 and states that they may violate the First Amendment as they are currently written based on the very recent Third Circuit decision in BL versus Manahoy SD case. I think that means South Dakota, which holds that schools have little or no authority to discipline speech generated off campus, even if it causes a disruption on campus. And his third point of reference here in relation to this policy is that under guidelines on page 2/3, the confiscation provision without accompanying due process predicates may actually violate the 14th Amendment.
We'll get it fixed.
Johnson Watts, I see that your hand is up.
Yes, this particular one, it seems so broad, and thank you, Mr. Freund, for the commentary that you provided on it. I was trying to figure out what is an example of this so I can understand the purpose of such a policy.
I'll defer to the administration.
Ms. Saylor, are you able to respond?
An example of an electronic device.
An example of when this policy would be violated such that it would warrant such a policy.
Well, I think it references to manners in which electronic devices could be inappropriately used in district buildings, and when that inappropriate use may call to question a need for the district to act.
The reason I'm asking is because I don't want to presume that I know why a policy like this exists. So there's got to be a reason why this policy has been generated, and I don't understand it. So I need someone to help me understand the purpose of the policy.
Maybe I could.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Brown, go ahead.
So I'll jump in and perhaps you can give us the legal perspective. As we continue to acquire more and more devices, more and more inventory that qualifies under this policy, as you heard the litany of lists of different devices that qualify and come under this policy, we need to ensure that all of our devices that are purchased with district funds that are a part of the district are being used in the manner in which they are intended. There are a number of examples across the years of inappropriate use at both the staff level and student level. And so this policy gives us the organizational, not only protection, but guidance, if you will, to ensure that everyone is on the same page when they are becoming stewards of our devices that we're funding through taxpayer dollars.
So this is about school district purchase devices, not about student individual cell phone.
I thought it was broader than that, Lucretia.
Yeah, I think it incorporates.
That's why I'm asking, because you know, if a parent sends a child to school and says, call me when you want me to pick you up, so they have a phone. I'm just trying to understand.
So if it's broader than district purchase devices, then we need to be clear about that in the policy. And so if it's not ready to move forward from our IT perspective, then perhaps we should hold it, Ms. Taylor.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can address this, but the way it reads, and Ms. Johnson-Watts, most of the districts have policies that do encompass not only district-owned devices, but also personal devices, which are ubiquitous these days. And certainly they can be used in inappropriate ways in the school setting. One of the things that I pointed out, and that, you know, administrators or people that don't do this as a living are at a disadvantage. I mean, there's a case that came down in the Third Circuit. By the way, that's SD is for school district. It's very close. It's not far away from here, actually. That case really made a significant change in what school districts are able to do in terms of speech that's generated off campus. There was tremendous confusion about this in the law before this in the Third Circuit, which of course is only one of 11 circuits, so it could be different places. But for our circuit, the Third Circuit, we are now considerably constrained in what discipline we can apply when speech is generated through social media or so forth, if it's generated off campus, or even if it causes a disruption on campus. So that's one of the things that we have to tweak in this policy, so we don't get ourselves in trouble or overstep the authority that the law gives us in this area. The decision, by the way, is on such a decision that really changes things in the law, and it is currently on appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States. But the Supreme Court only takes 1% of the cases that it's requested to hear, so we don't know whether or not they'll hear it or not. But it is a change in the law that we'll address in fixing the language.
Well, I would definitely look forward to more clarification, simply because we have all kinds of expression amongst all kinds of students, and I'm trying to understand where the violation comes in, and because it is so broad. Now, if it is specific to district purchase devices, then perhaps we should be saying that.
Yeah.
So if I could, again, I think it is designed to cover broadly the district devices as well as additional devices that may be used, even though it's a personal device that may be used on district policy. So the policy is designed to encompass all devices that will be used on district property.
On district property. Okay, so then in terms of somebody's walking home and they decide that they want to say something or post something, is that a problem? This is what I'm trying to understand.
Well, under this most recent case, it may well be a problem. And I think.
Can you send us a copy of the case, or at least send me a copy of the case?
No, I certainly will. It's a very interesting case. And
So, if you read the policy there, it does speak to kind of explicitly the off-campus activity. So if a kid is going to or from school, then that still kind of falls under the auspices of the school district to a certain degree. It's the old kind of porch to porch adage, where the school still has some level of responsibility for kids from porch to porch. So there's the policy is significantly broad to give the district the ability to manage on campus, the to and from campus, as well as some of the things that could impact the overall school environment.
So to me, given what explanation I've been given so far, it sounds like an overreach of authority. Once the children gets past that 15 mile per hour zone, they're off school property. So I'm a little confused by why we would want to be so involved in what a child does, child being anyone from age K through 12, what they do with their personal cell phone on their time once they've left the building.
Ms. Johnson-Watts, I'll make sure that I send around to the entire board a little summary of this, as well as send the entire case if you want to read it. But it does make a substantial dent in what educators traditionally thought that they were able to do with regulating off-campus speech. And
yeah, I
think what Mr. Parker said is kind of a gray area now under the case. Certainly, if you were on a bus, there'd be no question that we could do that. It's a brand new case. It's really only about 60 days old. So the law changes, changes all the time.
Yeah, and I really think we're in the business of supporting our children receiving a solid education rather than worrying about what they do or say on their cell phone when they're outside of the 15 mile per hour zone.
Well, I'll send this around and we'll work on the language, and I think you'll be satisfied when you see it again.
Thanks so much.
Mrs. Conover.
Conover, if you have a question or a comment, you can go ahead.
Yes, I do have a comment. So I do have some concerns because I'm going back to before we went virtual. There was a concern about bullying in our district, and we know that we have kids who actually use their cell phones to orchestrate gang activity, bullying activity. So I on one hand, I'm hearing and I'm understanding, okay, so whatever they do on their phone, and if they're outside of a specific area, it doesn't have anything to do with us. But in some instances, especially when there's sports games and stuff like that, and kids are orchestrating, then we should have some type of authority to actually move in and confiscate.
And if I may, I'm not sure about the confiscation piece, but I'll just make a parallel point with regards to sexual harassment and assault. If something happens off campus, we are very much still responsible and have an onus to remedy or find a remedy for the safe space, the environment. And to your point, oftentimes these things are coordinated or initiated through these devices. So we'll absolutely have to go back and have some conversation, but oftentimes there is there's some nuances in terms of where, as Mr. Parker mentioned, porch to whatever the phrase was you were, you used, where we are liable for certain pieces. And Mr. Freund, please jump in, but.
Yeah. Well, I can say to give Ms. Conover some solace, the case that I spoke of does mention two possible exceptions to this off-campus speech. One is when that speech is specifically directed at harassment of an individual or a specific group of individuals, or where it contains a threat of violence. So those are two areas that the case suggests that the school maintains pretty good authority to discipline. But other matters that it comments on, maybe on the election or what have you, or maybe you're taking a knee on that kind of thing, those kinds of controversial issues. The court has basically said, kids have the right to do this off a school campus, and the school's ability to address them is now limited, at least in the Third Circuit.
Yeah. So again, for me to underline it, and that's the old high school principal in me. I learned it and I taught it to my staff as well. The school has a level of accountability from porch to porch, from the time that kid leaves porch in the morning to the time that kid gets back to porch in the evening. There's some level of accountability legally that will always be part of the school district's responsibility. And again, that begins to be mitigated depending on situation. But if you look back at the policy, it speaks about travel to and from school. It speaks about the time of travel to and from school. So if little John Freund is a knucklehead and he skipped school today, even though he may be not on campus, if it's during the school time, there's still going to be potentially some school district ability to engage if there's a concern with technology or a violation of the district policy. I think it really comes back down to whether or not the district has any level of autonomy to enforce concerns related to a violation of policy during a time that a kid is in school or to or from school. And then specifically, and I'm going back down to number 2, where it speaks about extracurricular activities, that's going to the game on Fridays. And then number 3, and I think that's where Ms. Conover is coming from, if it's an activity that kind of disrupts the operation of the school, then there's still the opportunity for the school district to engage and begin to mitigate any concerns.
Well, my concern is about the use of the word speech, because I find that very interesting and curious. And then in terms of the porch to porch concept, at what time of day does that porch to porch concept expire? So those are some of the things that I would be curious to know more about. I don't need to really go into any further. There's no convincing me at this moment without having seen that case, but I do appreciate the attempts at this point to clarify. At this point, I need to learn a little bit more on my own, I guess. Thanks.
I'll send it to you. To everybody.
Are there any other questions or comments on this policy? I don't see any more, so if we want to do the last one, policy 810.2.
And Mr. Falco will present the updates for policy 810.2, the transportation policy.
Thank you, Tiffany. This policy 810.2 is under operations, transportation, video, audio recording. It replaces policy 810.2. The purpose of which is the use of video and audio recording equipment that supports efforts to maintain discipline and to ensure safety and security of all students, staff, contractors, and others being transported on district-owned, operated, or contracted school buses or school vehicles. Definitions: the school bus means a motor vehicle that is designed to carry 11 passengers or more, including the driver, and is used for the transportation of pre-primary, primary, or secondary school students to or from public, private, or parochial schools or events related to such schools or school-related activities. School vehicle means a motor vehicle except a motorcycle designed for carrying no more than 10 passengers, including the driver, and used for the transportation of pre-primary, primary, or secondary school students while registered by or under contract to the school district. The term includes vehicles having chartered, group, or party rights under the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission and used for the transportation of school children. Under authority, the board authorizes the use of video and audio recording on school buses and school vehicles for disciplinary and security purposes. The board prohibits the use of audio recording on any school bus or school vehicle that is not being used for a school-related purpose. Under delegation and responsibility, the board directs the superintendent or designee to ensure that each school bus and school vehicle that is equipped with video and audio recording equipment contains a clearly posted notice informing drivers and passengers of the potential for video and audio recording. This policy is posted on the district's publicly accessible website. Each school year, the policy is included in the student handbook and in any other district publication that sets forth the comprehensive rules, procedures, and standards of conduct. Guidelines: the district shall comply with the provisions of federal and state laws and regulations regarding student record requirements as applicable to the district's use and disclosure of recordings. Recordings considered part of a student's educational record shall be maintained in accordance with established student record procedures governing access, review, and disclosure of student records. And that is policy 810.2.
Anybody have any questions or comments on this policy? Seeing and hearing none, if we want, we can just take a vote on all 7 policies together. There's no objection to that.
Is this a first reading, Mrs. Brace?
Yes,
Don't think you need to take a vote on the first reading, but you can. if you
we
like.
usually, I don't know, we've always voted to put them through to the next meeting.
Oh, okay, sure. Mhm.
So is there a motion to pass items 1 through 7 through to the board meeting at the end of the month? Oh, Ms. Vega, your hand is up.
Yes, if we vote now to pass this to the next meeting, this is with the changes that have been said will be made, and then we'll vote then, right?
Correct. Yeah, we will get the updated policies before the next meeting then.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for items 1 through 7?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Seconded, was that Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the policies move forward to our board meeting on October 22nd. And I will now turn the meeting over to Ms. Wilt.
Thank you, Mrs. Brace. At this time, if there would be any public comment on non-agenda items from the public, I would ask that you raise your hand now, and I will call on you at that time. You'll have 3 minutes to provide comment. Seeing none, I'll go on to any old business. Seeing none, go on to, oops, did I do that backwards? Nope, new business. Sorry, guys. Any new business? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion.
Motion by Nicholas Miller. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Mrs. Brace. All in favor to adjourn the policy committee?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilt. And I'd like to call to order the Education Committee of the whole meeting for tonight, Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Tonight we have 3 items to discuss. Mr. Parker, do you have any comments to make?
No comments.
Okay. If anybody from the public has any comments to make on any of our agenda items, now is the time to raise your hand. Again, this is for the Education Committee. Seeing no hands, we can move on to our items. Dr. Brown, if you'd like to get started.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Brace. Our first item is our Title II non-public services, and Melissa Smith will be speaking to the memo and the scope of the initiative.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Good evening. Tonight, we're requesting the board's approval of the contract between St. John Vianney and Step by Step Learning for a cost of $48,472. St. John Vianney is a non-public school which receives federal funding through the Allentown School District. Step by Step Learning will provide professional development to St. John Vianney teachers in the form of ongoing coaching in the science of reading and assessment tools to determine instructional interventions needed. The professional development will support teachers in providing very explicit, quality literacy instruction in their core program. Teachers will also learn how to analyze assessment data and how to provide Tier 2 intervention to students in need in their classrooms. Students will receive a strong instruction in reading. There will be less students in need of intervention services since students are receiving strong instruction in reading. The cost again is $48,472. It is 2019-20 Title I and Title II funding, and the solicitor did review the agreement.
Are there any questions or comments on this item? Is this is Step by Step Learning who St. John Vianney chose, or is that somebody that we suggested they use for their professional development?
St. John Vianney selected Step by Step Learning.
And do we have any say? I don't know anything about them, but do we have any say in who they pick? Like, are they a good use of these funds?
St. John Vianney has been using Step by Step Learning in the past, and they have been seeing results, yes. Our responsibility is to ensure procurement is followed, to ensure that everything is discussed through consultation, but St. John Vianney does have the say in this program or the company that's selected.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, we'll just vote on that one now. Is there a motion to put through the non-public Title II to the board meeting at the end of the month?
So
I'll
moved.
move to move it forward.
Ms.
I'll second.
Matheson, seconded by Ms. Wilt.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, so that will be moved forward to the board meeting at the end of the month. Next up is the Communities in Schools contract.
This is an annual contract that is awarded after a public RFP process. We shared with our co-chairs along the way the timeline for the RFP and the results of the RFP. And as a result, Community in Schools had the most appropriate response to our RFP. Missy Smith will walk through the elements of the partnership. We also have Mr. Tim Mulligan online and available to answer any additional questions.
Thank you again, Dr. Brown. Tonight, we're here to request the board's approval to award the competitive proposal to communities and schools to support the work of restorative practices while providing integrated student supports to students at Allen, South Mountain, William Penn, and the Reengagement Center at a cost of $549,407. Cost per program and building is as follows. Allen and Deer High School, the cost is $135,253 per building. At William Penn and the Reengagement Center, it's $81,540 per program. And at South Mountain Middle School, it is $75,178. The purpose of the project is to build the capacity of the Allentown School District staff to implement restorative practices in their daily instructional and non-instructional routines. Additionally, student-level services, including one-to-one student counseling, group counseling, mentoring, family conferences, and community meetings will be provided. The scope of work includes in-person group training on restorative practices for teachers, other instructional and non-instructional staff, facilitation of circles where appropriate based on individual roles and positions within the district, evaluation of the training and implementation process, as well as the expected measurable outcomes of all training and coaching at the staff, student, and family levels, respectively. Integrated student supports is a school-based approach to promoting students' academic success by developing and securing, coordinating students' supports that target academic and non-academic barriers to achievement. At communities and schools, this includes one-to-one supports in the form of case management for students with low academic, behavior, and attendance. Integrated student supports directly aligns to the strategic area 1, cultivate a culture where students feel safe, valued, and nurtured. The desired outcome of this work is to have all ASD students, families, and staff regularly using restorative practice in their daily workflows, which will include classroom teaching, staff-to-staff relations, as well as family and community engagement. Services will include an evidence-based model of integrated student support, which has proven results to increase graduation rates and decrease dropout rates. Services will be provided at designated schools determined by the administration, which we have listed above. Coordination of services in the school and community will be directed to meet the students' educational, social, and behavioral needs of identified students for the term of the agreement. Again, the cost is $549,407. The source of funds is Title IV, as well as the Continuity of Education Grant for our ATSI schools, which are Allen and Deer.
And this was reviewed by the solicitor. If we may make one point of clarification before any questions, this work speaks to communities in school staff. So we'll go back and revise where it says Allentown School District staff, because this is community and school staff that are working in our buildings. Just to clarify.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Watts, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I am looking to understand what type of collaboration might go on with all of the other programs that we have going on. I think Communities in Schools is wonderful. I love the work that they're doing. I just want to get an understanding of the interface, if any, with some of the other initiatives that have been brought forward over the last 6 months.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Ms. Watts. The answer to that is really the whole way that Communities in Schools works is a kind of collective impact approach. We are continually working with partners. I like to say that when you get Communities in Schools, you also get our Rolodex, because what we do is we are a connector, and our folks are trained both to work with those resources that are both within the school and also in the community, and making sure that we're making those vital connections. Another thing that's always important to us is ensuring that what we're doing is not compartmentalized from the school, but it's ingrained in the very fabric of how the school is operating. So, so I appreciate that question. And I just want to say that that's very much about how we operate in the schools and in the district.
And if I can add to that a little bit, Ms. Johnson-Watts, in two ways, I think you see a really significant alignment with the work CIS is doing and the school district vision. In years past, if you go back 3 years ago, 4 years ago, this bucket of resources would have been focused on integrated student supports. And I think that was the kind of the title and the way that it was implemented. Now you see still some of the elements of the integrated student supports, but you see this being focused on restorative practices. So we made the statement a year and a half ago that we were becoming a restorative district and that we were engaging all partners and moving away. So this is back to that whole conversation about Leader in Me and all the different programs, right? We wanted to singularly focus on one philosophy, right? Additional resources, additional outputs, great, but one single philosophy. So this represents the district identifying a singular philosophy and communities and schools being an absolutely phenomenal partner in acknowledging the direction of the district and really jumping on board and being 2 feet in with us on the implementation of our district-wide restorative practices approach. I'd say the second piece there is, and I'll talk about some of the work with the Century Fund and the middle school transformation and all of that work that we're pushing out to create better outcomes for kids. Communities and Schools is one of those partners that's at the table with us with that Next Century Allentown process. So there's some individual and unilateral work that's happening between the district and communities and schools, but CIS is also a partner in the CSI work and the middle school transformation. So the alignment of form and function is really strong at this point, exactly to what I believe you're hitting at is this kind of one-off in what you all do, or is this specifically aligned to what we need? And I would say it's absolutely the latter. And Tim and his team have been absolutely phenomenal about understanding that that's the district approach and really jumping in and being a part of it.
Thank you so much for clarifying, because I wasn't sure if this was going to become silo A, silo B, silo C, and everybody's doing their thing, or is it really meshing and creating a nice network of support for every student? So, okay, thank you for alleviating my concerns.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to pass this through to the board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Johnson-Watts, seconded by Ms. Conover. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that will be moved forward to our meeting on the 22nd. And then the last thing we have is a virtual campus update.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Brace. If we could have our PowerPoint displayed on the screen. And we can advance the slides. So this will serve as our October 8th update on our virtual campus. We'll cover and give them updates on the topics highlighted here, our community COVID update, along with any other health and safety discussions or items that we need to highlight. We'll give an overview of where we are with professional development, highlight some data on communications, and then our department that will be featured this evening is student services and how they're supporting K-12 students in this virtual environment. Next slide, please. So with regard to health and safety, we are continuing to monitor Next slide, please. Continuing to monitor the local COVID rates through the PDE COVID-19 early warning dashboard. And so what you have before you is the most recent update, which is always looking back at the previous 7 days. And this covers the period from September 25th through October 1st. The area that PDE has identified as really critical in guiding the instructional model that an LEA is using is highlighted for you there in the red box. So that's the indicator of the incidence rate per 100,000. And as you can see, as you look at that data in that red box and other data displayed for you here, you can see that we're experiencing a bit of an uptick, if you will. So between the previous 7 days that were shared with you last month and this most recent 7-day period, we've seen a slight increase in the incidence rate per 100,000. So 29.9 versus the 43.5. And I won't read through the rest of them. As you know, I defer to our health experts to really explain explicitly, but the positivity rate is also an indicator as well. As we advance to the next slide, here's where we look at PDE's guidance for instructional models that are applicable for use during COVID-19. So based on the level of community transmission within the county, which is those data that we shared on the previous slide, you'll see guidance categorized in low, immediate, or substantial levels. Right now, based on the information that we just shared on the previous slide, the Allentown School District is falling within that moderate range with our cases and our positivity rate. So this is just sharing and being very transparent on the data that we're using to guide our discussions as we move forward. Next slide, please. Here I'll defer to Mr. Parker to give an overview of how we intend to use this data on some critical decision-making points going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Again, as you may remember, the board made the decision to implement the virtual campus through the first quarter with the expectation that we would review all levels of data and then make a decision prior to the end of the first quarter for what subsequent quarter and or a year would be. Many schools have already decided that were virtual, have already decided or made that original decision for the first semester. We decided to take it by quarter to give us the opportunity to pivot if the opportunity arose. So you'll see here our next steps. So we're going to determine the direction for the next quarter, continuing to look at the COVID data that you just saw from Dr. Brown. We're going to be reviewing our virtual campus success data. Ultimately, we want to make sure that this is working well for our students and our families. A big part of this, if you haven't heard, Allentown has some fairly old buildings, maybe news, but we need to make sure that we can assess our level of building readiness to ensure from the air handling and filtering systems to the water systems in our buildings, we're able to provide a safe environment in addition to kind of the basics right now, which is social distancing in our classrooms. We need to ensure that we have some continued communication with our families and our staff. Coming into this process, I take my hat off to the team. I think they did a really good job of making sure that we continually met with our with our teaching and instructional staff. We met with our principals. We talked to our collective bargaining units as a whole. We talked to our parents. We talked to our students. So we're going to continue that process and get some feedback on where we are to help inform the board in terms of what our constituency is saying about next steps. And then we're targeting October 22nd, which would be the date of the board meeting this month, for some communication of next steps. So no decisions made as of yet, but we know that we need to manage and monitor the positivity rates, and we need to look at some local success data to see where we are and make a recommendation for the next quarter.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. So with regard to opening of schools, we'll dive right into professional development. Next slide, please. What we've noticed, and now we're almost 4 weeks in, and we understand, and we want to make sure that we reiterate, we knew that this would be most challenging, making this seismic shift from a brick and mortar, in-person, face-to-face instructional model to a completely virtual model, and making it high quality and adhere to those 5 principles that Mr. Parker introduced way back in June. And so what we have for you here is this first area of professional development, where we're looking to address some of our continued implementation goals, but also being very realistic and transparent about some challenges and how we're going to address them through professional development. So on the left-hand side, we have a PD that's mapped out to begin even as soon as this Friday and continue through our first district professional development day on October 12th. We'll focus on continued implementation for Accelerate, for our K-5 buildings, Edgenuity. We'll continue to expand our discussions on Zoom and how to use them to manage classrooms. We have some specific titles that we're working with our Ed Elements partner on for our teachers as well, in terms of building relevancy and ownership in the classroom. We have some targeted sessions for those who are working directly with our English learners. And then we really want to highlight and elevate social emotional learning, as you'll hear later on in tonight's presentation. However, we also want to balance that. We've realized some challenges. We're going fully virtual. We're having to integrate large data sets across many variables. And so that has presented some challenges for the end user at the building and classroom level. So we continue to identify and address that and adapt our system, whether it's the identification of additional supports and or assigning different human resources to support in these challenging areas. We're looking at the pacing of instruction for our students and making sure that we're giving our teachers and principals opportunities to give us feedback, because there may be some critical adjustment that needs to happen. We know that we're looking at our elementary schedules, because we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate the high rigor, but at the same time, not burn out our students, our smalls or our talls, and their families. We're looking to address any technical support challenges that are still emerging. Again, this is all developing real time. There's no playbook, and we're being transparent and remaining agile as we work through the challenges. And then lastly, continuing to scale up parental support and making sure that we create space for our families to let us know what that support is that they need. If we could, next slide, please. Just going a little deeper, sharing with you the vision and the ideal state that we're looking to move to, but understanding where we are right now. In terms of professional development, we're working with our teachers to maintain and to maintain access and make sure that we're getting the exposure that we need. And understand, oftentimes that may be as simple as making sure our students have the device. We're still in a distribution phase. We continue daily to reach out to those students that we're not seeing activity for in our data. Our team has been working very, very hard to have attendance conversations and enrollment conversations each and every day, and identifying those students who are still missing those requisite tools to participate in this virtual environment. So while we understand that there's a desired or ideal state of mastery and deep learning, and we don't want to make any excuses here, but we're just saying that we've got to make sure that we have outfitted our students with what they need. So if you think of Bloom's taxonomy, we cannot jump to the highest ideal state without first dealing with the basics. And right now, we're still at the phase of identifying which families are still in need of devices and may have become new to the need, in terms of didn't need a device or Wi-Fi during the summer or the long-term closure, but now seeing the socioeconomic status of their home changing. But know that this is where we're going in support of our personalized learning and the ideal state for our professional development. Next slide, please. We continue to update and maintain our learning management system for our teachers. So while we're asking them and appreciate the active participation that they are exhibiting in our anytime, anywhere learning, we continue to make sure that we're refreshing new topics and new opportunities for training outside of the traditional model. So yes, I mentioned our PD day that's coming up, but know that we record and we house webinars and anything that we can to support our instructional staff within our internal learning management system for staff, not students. Next slide, please. So here's where we're looking to go. Beginning at the bottom of the arrow in the first phase, you heard Mr. Parker mention wanting to creating opportunities initially for teachers to give us feedback. We want to go back to that model now that we're 4 weeks in and give our teachers opportunity and space to talk to us about what is needed. We understand that this is a very critical space and time and it's new, but understand that it could become increasingly complex as we contemplate our re-entry phase and strategies. So maintaining a virtual and a hybrid environment is going to take a lot of coordination and scale up PD as well. So we want to create that space to hear directly from them and let them know that we will be arm in arm with them walking through this. Secondly, we want to make sure that, as we mentioned, elementary schedules and secondary schedules, we want to make sure that they're in alignment and they are developed to support where we are now and where we're going with our reentry plan and our ultimate virtual campus goals. We always want to try to identify alternative options for PD and not just the sit and get PD. Like, we really want this to be interactive and we really need the teacher feedback to help the professional development develop organically, if you will. And then lastly, have this culminate into robust continuous support for our instructional staff as we position ourselves to maintain a virtual environment and perhaps a hybrid environment depending on any forthcoming decisions that are made. Next slide, please. In terms of communications, we'll move directly into the next slide where we're again presenting to you some of the data from the period of our last presentation to you, September 24th, I believe, up into today. So what we see is our dialogues overall have decreased by 52 dialogues. That's a good thing. We have a customer score of 8.3 out of 10. Our positive experiences for those who responded, because every customer doesn't necessarily respond to the post survey, is at a 5. Our dialogue age, which is really important, that speaks to our responsiveness. The last time we were here before you, it was a 0.4, it's now a 0.5. Nonetheless, we maintain 0 past due dialogues and we don't have any unresolved. Next slide, please. Here's just another graphic depiction of the age distribution. So it's still taking us about 2 hours on average to initially respond to our customers. And again, you see the 0.5 reference on average for the time it takes us to complete a resolution, which is great. It's in line exactly with the goals that we set. Next slide, please. So our customer, during this last period, again, you can see the longest bar there. Our customer continues to be our parents primarily, followed by our students and our general community members. Typically, our parents are generating dialogues of concern and or questions. Next slide, please. The top areas for those concerns and our questions are technical support. And so we're using this data to make sure that we're continuing to be responsive and identify any gaps or areas that we need to shore up communication or support in that area. The last time we were here, there was a middle school and high school identified. This time we see that we have a dialogue from Allen. Family and community engagement, high schools in general, and then a few human resource dialogues or the hot topics or interest areas for this period. Entry point. This is interesting because we are doing what we set out to do. Most entry points are beginning on our district website landing page. So we're able to drive traffic or increase traffic to our website, which is exactly one of our goals. And just to share some of that website data, you'll see below at the bottom of this slide that our website during the period of October 1st through the 7th was viewed 65,000 times with 12.1 thousand unique users. Now that's decreased a bit from that first month of school opening, September 1 through September 30th, where we had approximately 495,000 views and 43,000 unique users. That concludes our communications update. As mentioned at the top of this discussion, Student Services is our department of highlight this evening. So I will not waste any time and I'll turn it over directly to Ms. Polick to give you a view of how her department is working to support our students virtually.
Great. Do you mind if I share my screen, please? I will bring up my PowerPoint. Thank you. So tonight I have Stacy Gill-Martin, a Student Services School Climate Coordinator, and Julie Scheibel, the Student Services Coordinator, to help with this presentation. So like Dr. Brown mentioned, we will give you an overview of how the Student Services Department is supporting in this virtual environment by reviewing our staff roles and responsibilities, how social emotional learning is embedded within our high quality instruction, health and safety protocols, student support, attendance, communication and outreach, and flexibility.
Tiffany, I don't know, but I don't see your PowerPoint.
Oh.
So I'm guessing no one else can see it, but
Let's try this again.
Okay, I think it's gonna work now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, it's not moving. So Student Services roles and responsibilities and critical support communication structure is important in supporting our families. So as part of that, the department is really organized in three categories, basically, and they do cross over, but just to give you an idea, the attendance and outreach with the Student Services Coordinator, our home and school visitors, community school aides, our elect and family center staff, our homeless liaison, and our outreach workers. And then under student supports, that includes our school climate coordinator, our school counselors, our Gear Up counselors, behavioral health specialists, our behavior management specialists, and 5 clerical staff that support the department. And then within that health services category, we have a number of health services staff that includes our nurses and also our dental hygienists. So many of the individual roles and responsibilities are unique to virtual campus. For example, our health services staff, they've been creating and delivering virtual health lessons that will include how to properly wear a mask or how to wash your hands, and providing those for teachers, but also being able to deliver those within periods of the day that make sense for their building. They're collaborating with other health services staff to create those lessons. They're also have virtual pages within the Google Classroom where they post many different links for families and for staff and for students to be able to access. Our outreach workers are specifically focused on attendance. They're attending our attendance team meetings, assisting the district and building administrators in engaging students, non-engaged students, seeking advocates for parent and family partnerships. They're maintaining documentation and also helping with translating. Our home and school visitors are also really focused on attendance, which is important during this time, making sure that our students are engaged in reaching out to families that may be having a difficult time getting connected. They're analyzing attendance data on a daily basis, also assisting with conducting home visits as needed, meeting with the building attendance team to be able to discuss interventions, specific interventions for students and families that need additional support, and facilitating connections between students and teachers. Our school counselors are virtually leading small groups, social skills groups, restorative circles. They're communicating with outside agencies to provide virtual supports for students, providing resources for students and families. They've been helping with even technology support and device support for families. So they've attended many of the trainings that the teachers also attend so that they are knowledgeable about the programs and logging in and being able to support in that way. They also, many of the counselors have Google Classroom set up where they are providing resources for students in addition to like a calming room that students can use if they're having a tough time. Our community aides are assisting with outreach to families. So they are visiting homes of students that are not engaged or minimally engaged. While they're in the homes, they're helping with resources for families, showing families how to access the parent university. If they're needing forms for different things, they're really out there doing a great job of just helping to support the many needs that our families have. And our homeless liaison has just been doing a great job with building relationships now with the shelters in the community and making sure that all of our students have access and monitoring our daily attendance data for our homeless students. As part of our commitment to providing support to families, when questions and concerns come through the Student Services Department, we attempt to handle them at the first level there with the Student Services Coordinator, Climate Coordinator, Working Papers Office, if that's support that a family needs, or the Records Department. If we're unable to address the concern at that level or question or needed support, we would then communicate with the building principal, who would work together with either outreach worker, homeschool visitor, health services staff, or our school counselors to find some resolve for whatever the concern is. And our goal is always to solve those issues or provide that support, depending on how critical, within 2 hours or at the end of the day at the latest. So in the area of health and safety, in order to gain feedback and be able to discuss all of the changes, and I should say forever changing world that we're in right now, we are meeting with our health partners from St. Luke's, Lehigh Valley Health Network, and the Allentown Health Bureau, anywhere from weekly to every few weeks, just depending on what the need is. We discuss the conditions for reopening schools, the CDC guidelines and how that affects us, and also critical items and documents related to COVID-19. So the ASD departments that are included in those meetings, again, obviously is Student Services, our Operations Department, where we've talked a lot around athletics and making decisions there and getting their guidance on that, facilities, and also human resources. So a number of our protocols that I just mentioned on our health and safety protocols and guidelines, they're all based on guidance from the Center for Disease Control, the Department of Health, and PDE. We've created travel guidelines for students, which obviously change depending on what the travel restrictions look like. And that is all vetted through that health partner meeting that I just described. Also quarantine isolation of staff and students, including symptoms, which they have also given a lot of feedback with, and we show those documents often just because of the potential of them changing. Exclusion and return to school guidance, symptom self-screening tool, signage that's used in the buildings, and also a key terms bank that you would see on it's also on our website under the parent university, that just defines all of the terms that are associated with COVID-19 so that families and everyone were using the same language. Another large part of the work our nurses have been doing and health services staff is contacting families and assisting with scheduling students for immunization appointments to ensure that they are up to date with their vaccines. So as part of Governor Wolf's regulations, he temporarily suspended the immunization regulations for 2 months. So not for all immunizations, but just the immunizations that you need to be updated in 7th grade and 11th grade. So as part of that, all students still need to be vaccinated, even in a hybrid, in a virtual setting. So that is something that we've been communicating with families on an ongoing basis. Our communications department has been sending out ongoing communication and also at the building level so that families are aware of this. The number of students currently out of compliance right now is 841. So again, as part of meeting with our health partners, they are all working diligently with us we've had vaccination clinics, most recently at Allen, Deerhoff, and Trexler. Our secondary schools is where we see our largest numbers of non-compliance or the need to have those updated vaccines. And you can see there, we had, around 60, 64, 66, and 73% of students vaccinated at those clinics. The clinics included St. Luke's, Allentown Health Bureau, and Lehigh Valley Health Network. And also our nurses were there helping with the clinic and also vaccinating. We have 2 clinics coming up here on October 20th and 22nd. That will be led by Lehigh Valley Health Network to also assist with helping students get updated with their vaccines. So we're also talking about potentially scheduling some more clinics with the amount of students that we have there that still need their updated immunizations. So in order to support our high quality instruction, we created or developed a social emotional learning working group to adapt resources to the virtual setting. So that group includes a number of administrators and teacher representatives, and they collaborate with the building stakeholders to develop an SEL resource bank that includes lessons, activities, and restorative circle prompts that are aligned with the 5 social emotional competencies. So it integrates that restorative practices piece and also our mindfulness programming and how those can work together. And again, oh, sorry, that's repeated there. Just like I said, the lessons and activities and prompts for teachers to be able to use in the virtual setting where social emotional learning should be embedded throughout the day.
Good evening. So when we consider synchronous learning in terms of SEL, teachers and counselors have the opportunity to embed core competencies into advisory time, intervention and enrichment, related arts, and they can also integrate SEL competencies into subject area lessons. Counselors are also offering FaceTime in small group settings for students that are identified or self-refer, and they can work on them on SEL strategies. And independent activities are also offered as a follow-up to counselor lessons. Slide, please. In regards to asynchronous offerings of social emotional learning, resources and activities are posted on counselor-created sites and promoted through classroom teachers. In terms of flexibility, counselors are offering virtual hours throughout the day, and virtual calm down rooms are available for students to use independently to exercise self-management skills. Slide, please. So Tiffany also mentioned that our counselors have been creating various virtual experiences for our students using all kinds of different platforms, either through Google Slides or Google Sites. And I just posted a couple examples on here. One of them is a calming room. They're getting creative with their Bitmojis. There's Ms. Cortez and Ms. Larson there. And they're also adapting their guidance lessons to virtual engaging activities. Slide, please. Our student assistance teams are also continuing to meet. That's really important so they can continue to serve the students that are in need. And they've also adapted their referrals and their forms so that they can still be accessed by staff, by families, by students, and to ensure that they can still reach out. You can see here we have our, I'm sorry, go back for 1 second. Our current SAP referrals are listed here on this slide, and they include new referrals and also students that were carried over from last year that still need services. Slide, please. And these are some of our community supports that are providing resources at this time. And most of them are providing either therapy or mentoring through individual or group counseling. And some of these organizations are also offering our SAP training for us for free and virtually, so that we can continue to have appropriate representation on our student assistance teams.
Slide. So we are continuing to serve our families and students that are experiencing homelessness even during this time. So we are ensuring that their basic needs are met. So whether that's for connecting them with community resources or through distributing donations that we might have on hand, we're trying to get them the support and resources that they need. Tiffany had mentioned earlier, Mr. Torres, who is our new homeless liaison that began at the beginning of September, has certainly hit the ground running and making connections with community members and especially the shelters. So one of the big tasks that he had upon coming on board was to make sure that all of the student school-age children that are in our shelters in Allentown all were enrolled and had devices and Wi-Fi access where they were in the shelter. So that was a big task that we're happy to report is the kids in the shelters are up and running. And we're also, as Tiffany mentioned, monitoring their attendance very closely, checking weekly on their attendance to make sure that none of them are slipping in terms of being connected to their schools. Next slide.
So our student services also continues to work on supporting attendance, especially in this challenging virtual environment. So according to PD's guidance, schools must account for students' daily attendance. And when students are participating in virtual campus, they're expected to follow their daily schedule for synchronous and asynchronous learning sessions. So as part of that, the family attendance expectations for students is attending school daily, being prepared each day, being ready to learn and engage in instruction, completing assignments on time each day for each class, and adhering to the student and family handbook while engaged in virtual learning. So again, we're able to support in those areas where families may be struggling. With parents and guardians having students ready, children ready to engage every day in digital learning, supporting your child in logging into the system if necessary, assisting with contacting support from teachers if your child is struggling. So making sure that we're giving that information so families know where to go. Send an email to the school attendance email, which I'll explain in a minute here, to notify the teacher, or call the school each time your child is unable to attend school and provide the reason, and share with the teacher or school-based staff any barriers to their child's continuous attendance that could impact their educational achievement. So that way, through our support staff, we can help to support whatever it is that they may be challenged with. Each school now has a dedicated attendance email to help with streamlining communication from families. So it is the school name attendance@allentownsd.org. So if a student does not attend a synchronous session and complete or attempt to complete the coursework, they would be marked absent. So in order to excuse an absence, a parent excuse is required with just the student name, student ID, parent or guardian name, the date the student was absent, and reason for absence. So much like in the brick and mortar setting where most parents would write a note, now they're able to send an email, or even if the school is using a platform like Class Dojo or Remind, and they send it to the teacher through there, the teacher can easily screenshot it and forward it to that email address to allow for our attendance secretaries to adjust the attendance. So also, if a parent requests a temporary absence permit, they can do that through that attendance email. And it's also been, we also formatted it into a fillable PDF that's on the website, like many of our documents, so that families are able to easily fill them out and hopefully either screenshot it or send it back to us. And if students are absent for an extended period due to COVID, then a doctor's note would be required.
So our attendance team meetings continue to operate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, even while we are in a virtual setting. So in those meetings, there are various staff in them, including the homeschool visitors, outreach workers, counselors, administrators, nurses, and we have community providers, and Lehigh County Office of Children and Youth Services. And we are reviewing data. We are identifying barriers to attendance. And this year, obviously, the barriers look a little bit different in a virtual setting. So identifying what those barriers are and making connections either with staff in the schools or in the community, our partners in the community, to help intervene. Next slide. So in terms of our tiered supports regarding attendance, on tier 1 at the bottom, we're doing everything we can to reach families, by phone or by email or however we can. And when that doesn't work, then we try to reach out in other ways, including home visits or contacting emergency contacts when we can contact a parent or guardian. So working through that. And the 3 positions that are really working exclusively in this area are homeschool visitors, outreach workers, and our school community aides that are all working together to really look at the attendance daily, figure out what families need, what support, and working with them on that. So if our tier 1 outreach doesn't work, then we move up to tier 2, and as absences increase. So we're also connecting our students that are ESL or special education. We're connecting with those departments to customize our interventions and outreach to include those staff members as well. And obviously keeping in mind those families that might be experiencing homelessness. And finally, really coordinating with our community partners. We have a number of community partners that we work closely with that I'll talk about in a minute. In terms of home visits, that's okay. In terms of home visits, as of today, our staff has completed 797 home visits since the first day of school. And these are families that either are non-engaged or have limited engagement. So we're finding that as our staff are going out to homes and finding out what's going on, they're really sitting down with families and trying to figure out what the connectivity issue is, because that's a lot of the time what it is. They have difficulty with the device, the Wi-Fi hotspot, something like that that they're having difficulty with. So our staff are connecting with them, finding out what they need, if they need, if it's IT needs to get involved, we obviously make that connection. But we're getting a lot of good connections with families by visiting the homes. And of course, we're following all of the health and safety guidelines that have been outlined with PPE and maintaining social distancing. And also providing other resources and connections to community resources regarding basic needs. Next. So as I mentioned, we have some community partners that we work really closely with and related to attendance. The first listed here, communities and schools, which we heard about earlier, and the buildings that they are located in. So connecting families and staff at communities and schools. Justice Works, Pine Brook, and Valley Youth House are our we call them truancy providers. They are community providers that have been identified to support our families and students that have barriers to attendance. So they are assisting families, especially during this time. They're doing even a little bit more than just the attendance. They're helping to support that technology in their homes. They are helping to meet basic needs. So there's a lot of the agencies are working closely with providing food and other resources to families that are experiencing what so many people are during this time. And we work closely with Lehigh County Office of Children and Youth as they are a partner in terms of ensuring that children are in school across the city and the county. Next.
The student service continues to be flexible to meet the needs of students by providing online resources, again, with our social emotional learning embedded throughout the day at all levels, providing support to families depending on the unique needs that are associated with virtual learning, supporting virtually using Google Classroom, coordinating various services for students, strategically scheduling lessons to align with the virtual schedule, providing self-care resources for all of our staff, and also assisting family just with technology, navigating the virtual schedule, and connecting to the various platforms and any changes that happen during this time. So that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions.
Ms. Johnson-Watts?
Hi, thank you so much for the update, and I look forward to the continuation of this. This is really helpful. A couple of questions that has a lot to do with just clarification and then perhaps a suggestion. The attendance conversation, I just want to be certain of what I'm hearing, because I know that opening day or so, we had 92% attendance across all the, 96%. No, 92% across all the districts and 96% at the secondary level. No, the high school level. And so I'm wondering if the people that were referred to as being still in the distribution stage, are those coming out of the 92, 96%? But was the attendance, the 100% that the 92 and 96 came out of, was that the 100% of people who had the equipment? Or is that 100% of, meaning the 16,000, close to 17,000 students that are enrolled in ASD?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult for me to even articulate it, because I remember 92% and 96% as attendance rates on our first post start of school update, and being that I heard in this presentation that we're still in distribution stage, I want to get clarity on the 92 and the 96. Is that out of, when you look at that data set, is it based on 100% representing all of the students enrolled in ASD, or is that 100% all of the students that have had confirmed connectivity at the start of the school year?
So,
I think that, oh, go ahead.
go
ahead,
go
Mr.
ahead,
Parker.
Dr. Brown.
Oh, no, I was going to say I think Dr. B would be able to help us with that, but I'll defer to you.
Yeah, so I think I understand your question. When you say attendance percentage. The attendance percentage is number of students present out of the number of students enrolled. So present being the numerator, enrolled being the denominator. Is that kind of where you're asking?
Yes. So then is it accurate for me to interpret that to mean that we're somewhere in the vicinity of 8% of all of our students in the Allentown School District still in need of distribution? Or didn't attend? This is what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to narrow down what our needs are, basically.
Yeah. So I see where you're going. I think it's a little bit we've actually been having this discussion internally, so I can feel people looking at me because they know what I'm about to say. So there's enrollment, active enrollment, and then attendance, right? Three different things. And I think the numbers represent the number of kids that attended a class out of those who have kind of actively engaged and enrolled. There's another number of folk who either haven't engaged, haven't been active, or may have engaged in a small number of days, and we need to get them, back into the proverbial loop of attendance. So some of those kids are the ones that you're saying may have some connectivity issues, and those are the kids that they're actually going out to visit. Kids that we haven't seen either at all or sparingly, and those are the kids that we believe may still have some level of connectivity issue, and why they're not engaging consistently.
Okay. And also, thank you for the report on homeless students in particular, specifically, because there is some talk that evictions may be on the rise. I don't know. Prayerfully, that is not the case. But I do want to continue to hear that specific group, because I do get questioned as to what we're doing. So it was wonderful. And I basically said to people, listen, we had someone just get started, so we're looking forward to hearing from them. And so I greatly appreciate this, because all I have to do is refer them to the video. And it also helps as well here. The other thing is the Let's Talk. You mentioned 31 communications received. And as I'm out and about, I'm hearing people say, I didn't know about Let's Talk. And I find it hard to believe, because I'm a Facebook person, but I don't know what else can be done in terms of getting the word out about Let's Talk. I'm wondering, is it possible to do a version that's called Díganos or something, like speak to us in Spanish, so that people even identify the words when they see it? Because, it baffles my mind when I'm talking to folks and they're like, oh, I didn't know. And maybe it slipped their mind, or maybe they were embarrassed to tell me that they didn't pay attention the first time. But whatever the case may be, I'm just hoping that we're doing whatever we can to funnel people through that, because 31 to me sounds low. It just sounds low. And I'm not saying that 31 is inaccurate. I'm just saying it sounds low in comparison to people who say, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. And maybe they just want personal human touch from the first second. And then the other thing is, in terms of teachers who may need Let's Talk, like, is there a way that, not in the big professional development meeting, but in the small, this is what my students are saying to me context, is there a way for them to get that word pushed out to administration, or do they go through their building leader? How does that work?
So they would go through their building leader. All of the principals meet with their teachers consistently. So if there's any concern from a kid perspective, or even if that's something that they're hearing from multiple parents, then they shoot it right directly up to their principal.
Okay, so I mean, those are pretty much the questions that I have, but you know, I appreciate all of you are doing. Thank you so much for the targeted information related to certain groups and attendance. So you know, you can't say it enough. You know, there is no rule book, there is no playbook. You guys are just, you know, getting this together and making it happen. So you're greatly appreciated for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Go ahead.
So, I did hear what Ms. Johnson Watts was talking about in terms of questioning about the attendant, the the percentage, that 8%. My question would be, shouldn't parents by now have their devices? Are they not just not responding and coming in and getting their devices? And how are they being held accountable for not picking up their devices? Because I understand, so I'm not minimizing the things that many parents have to go through in our district or in any other district. But we have an obligation as parents to educate our children. So what does that look like in terms of accountability on their part? Because if you give me a hotspot and you giving me a device, even if I don't have anywhere to live, and I'm not minimizing it, I'm just saying, I'm talking about me, I would be trying to make some kind of arrangements to ensure that there's a space somewhere, because at least we might not have a whole loaf, but we have a half, to ensure that my kids are getting educated. So what does that accountability look like?
Yeah, so that begins to be a really tough conversation when you talk about accountability for parents, and just to be, you know, really transparent. There's not necessarily a mechanism from a school district standpoint for us to leverage there. I think our approach has been much more focused on providing as much support as possible and removing all barriers and presupposing the best of intention on those who are at home caretakers of our students. But the only mechanism that really exists in terms of accountability is the one connected to attendance. So if we do have attendance issues and kids are not engaging, there are mechanisms that kick in terms of accountability for parents for attendance. That's and how many, I forget, was it 700 and some odd visits, Julie?
Yeah, almost 800.
Yeah, almost 800 visits that staff has made to the homes of parents. So that would be the mechanism is attendance. But beyond that, school districts just aren't equipped with the mechanisms to do that. So we focus much more on support and removing barriers. And then I'll say, I think for the most part, we're able to capture most of our parents through that approach.
So I'm receiving that, but I'm also, I also cannot negate the fact that truancy actually, you have some parents realistically that just say, hey, this is hard, I'm not going to do it. Those kids still are entitled to an education, and those parents still have to be held accountable. You know what I mean? I mean, we're carrying our load, and we're providing every resource that we can, and jumping through hoops. So I'm interested, because we have social workers that's in the state of Pennsylvania. There's all kinds of there's nonprofit organizations that are out there that's helping. So I'm concerned when you say that here we are in October, and there's still families who haven't picked up devices. And I think that's what I'm hearing you say. I have a problem with that.
Can I chime in a little bit? I was just going to say, part of the home visits and the outreach are really trying to figure out what the barriers are and what the circumstances are. So typically during a typical school year, when we're in brick and mortar buildings, we would, be enforcing our compulsory school attendance law, which we still will be doing this year, but we're giving everybody a little bit of a grace period, I think, to make sure that we understand the circumstances and whether things are within their control or beyond their control, and how we can best support them. And if there still is no engagement, then we will start to move forward with our compulsory school attendance law enforcement.
So I'm gonna after this, I'm not gonna say anything else. And I appreciate what you're saying to me. But I cannot say this enough. Parents, we have to take responsibility. And to say, okay, I want to find out what your needs are, they should be running to us just as well as we're running to them. And I feel very strong about that. October, school has started. We have an obligation to ensure that our kids get an education. And listen, we'll take responsibility for what we're doing in district, but I'm also of the mindset to hold us parents responsible for making sure our kids get what, because I hear a lot, and I'm all for. I mean, if you need this, you need that, let's go get it, whatever you need. But to be, again, this is October. Okay, to say that, we're giving you a little grace period, there is no grace period. These kids been out of school since March. You understand? So we have to step up to the plate too as parents, and it's time. I don't know who needs to start having that conversation, but that conversation needs to be had. Because I don't think any of us have been born with a silver spoon in our mouths, but we have an obligation to make sure that our kids are in place so that they can get education. And that's just my thoughts. That's how I feel. And thank you guys for what you're doing, but I just want that to be hit. I'm an advocate for families and kids, but I want it to be heard loud and clear. Parents have a responsibility as well. We're listening and we're doing everything in our power. We need parents. And when I say parents, I'm including myself as well. We have to step up to the plate. Allentown School District has a website, whether it's in English or Spanish. If you want to know what it says, and I'm not minimizing, but I'm just saying, because there's some stuff out there that's written in Spanish, and I don't understand Spanish at all, but I'll knock on my neighbor's door, and I'll say, you got to read this to me. You understand? Or I'll find a way. So we need to start thinking that way in order for our kids to get the best education in our school district, especially if you guys are staying up all night, working day in and day out to make it happen. I mean, even me, myself, look, we're here. It's 9 o'clock. We still on the call. So we're trying to do something. So we need parents to step up to the plate as well. So I'm done. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
I have a question about the home visits. I know our teachers are in with their kids all day, but if a teacher were to want to visit a child, either on a professional development day or after school hours because they have a kid who just is not getting anything, are our teachers allowed to go do socially distant, PPE'd up home visits?
So as it stands, we have not supported or directed teaching staff to do so. I don't think we can prohibit, like we can't jail them for going to a kid's house to provide them some support. I think that's kind of similar to what teachers would do in the normal educational world. If they had a kid that was having an issue, they could contact the parent and have an opportunity to provide support for them in that way. So we wouldn't necessarily prohibit it, but we wouldn't condone it based on the virus.
Okay.
If that's non-answer enough.
That's a great non-answer. Thank you. Ms. Wilt, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I would like to actually go back to the beginning of the presentation where Dr. Brown was presenting. And if I remember correctly, the one slide talked about data and progress and success for our virtual learning. And I just wanted to see, when we're monitoring that, are we soliciting student and family feedback on that as well? I've heard from families on various age groups of, mom and dad feel like they're back in kindergarten because they have to sit with their child so they don't turn the computer off and walk away. All the way through to the caseload for some of our secondary kids. It's hard to actually keep up with the amount of work that the asynchronous is providing in conjunction with the Google Classroom. And I'm just wondering if we are having those dialogues with our students to benchmark what they feel is success as well.
Yep. So I'll take that, and then Dr. Brown, you can jump in as you will. So part of the review process, now that we're a few weeks in, is exactly to do that. We talked about making sure that we have the opportunity to loop back to that focus group format where we can bring together some groups of parents and kids. I want to be part of the focus group myself because I'm dying trying to help my kid with this. Like, I get it from both perspectives. But we also are going to do some surveys so that we can get some wider response. And the feedback on that is going to help us with making that decision for the next quarter. So right now we have more anecdotal feedback, but we're going to have more defined structural feedback as we prepare for next steps.
Great, thank you.
I have my hand up. I'm just going to venture to say something. On the home visits, I have an example. I don't know if it applies to all, but I understand the home visits of the home visit team. But in terms of teachers and the student that may have difficulty, one of my neighbors invited me to sit in with their child on a couple of their class sessions. And in both cases, the teachers made very clear that they were available at certain times for Google Classrooms, and that the students were able to make appointments to be with them in a one-on-one Google setting. And in some cases, they offered up a time frame where a certain aspect would go into further detail if the student, if students wanted to join them at that time. So I think in those, can't get it, I think I can't speak for all teachers. I've only, sat in on 3 sessions, but I heard it mentioned each time about this, I don't know whether it was the Google Classroom or some other place where they were all going to meet up. Just not saying that's for everybody. I'm just saying that's what I've heard or witnessed myself.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Watts. Are there any other questions or comments on this? Seeing and hearing none,
I do have a question. I don't know how to I don't know how to raise my hand. I was
okay,
trying.
go ahead.
So is there anyone from is there anyone, I should say, sitting in on any of the classrooms to actually monitor and see how things are going along, like to see what a class is like? I heard Ms. Johnson-Watts talk about she went next door and she sat in on a neighbor, and I have had the chance to sit in because I have a student. But I'm wondering if administration, principals, have they had chance to sit in on the Ingenuity and or Google Classroom sessions to see how that's working. I know you guys are probably getting some feedback from parents because it's new and it's hard. We were part of the digital divide prior to COVID. But is anybody sitting in, or is that something that's to come in terms of giving us some feedback in terms of if it's working or not? I'm just curious to know.
It
Is
is
that
happening.
something that we're,
We can ask our EDs to chime in. Mr. Sang with the middle school level. It's happening and it continues to evolve and build as we look to implement virtual observations and those technical aspects of monitoring, but it is happening. Mr. Sang, can you chime in?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's a good question, and that is something that's already underway. In a typical school year, you'd almost call this a visit, where it's like, you know, as the administrator, you're checking in on the class, you're saying hello, you're seeing the kids. Those are the same things that are happening at the building levels now, as far as the different Google Classrooms. Those are shared with all administrators, so the administrators have access to all the Google Classrooms, the assignments, the different postings that the teachers have. And then our schools also have like master Google Sheets, if you will, where every individual teacher's Zoom link is located there. So in a moment, our administrators can pop from one room to another. I'd even give a shout out to Rob. I know that they have some contests going on where different administrators or staff will pop into different Zooms and do a raffle drawing for students that are present as a way to encourage attendance. We are still building out our processes for our virtual walkthroughs and virtual observations to make sure that we're getting, information from, our staff, our administration, but also best practices elsewhere, so that we're still aligned with the PDE Danielson framework.
thank you so much for explaining that to me, to giving me that feedback. I want to say, I said it before, I'm going to say it again. I know some people, there's many people that may not want to hear it, but I am extremely proud of what the district is doing. I'm going to continuously remind the public, that this district prior to COVID was not a one-to-one school district. There were laptops in classrooms. Some classrooms, maybe they were working, maybe they weren't. Maybe they were being used, maybe they weren't. But prior to COVID, this board was then given the understanding that we were part of the digital divide. We were not a one-to-one school district. So I'm going to continuously push and support our district in terms of the wonderful job that you guys are doing. Some people say, I don't even need to, you don't have to give me accolades because, this is what we do, but I'm going to give you accolades. I appreciate all that you're doing. And I ask these questions because I want the public, I know it's hard. I'm not, again, here's that word. I'm not minimizing the fact that it's not hard for families. We're used to dropping our kids off and going, some of us are having hardships, don't have jobs. So I'm not minimizing that at all. But our first concern is to keep our kids safe. And that's what we're doing by being virtual. But at the same time, our kids are becoming a part of the technology community and they're learning. And I just can't say it enough. I'm proud of what we're doing. And if we continue to pull together, reach out to the district for those families who are listening or whoever's going to jump on Facebook or Twitter after this, reach out to the district. We're all in the same team. We're not saying it's easy, but we're getting it done. So I just want to thank everybody tonight that is actually pushing forward and building our district.
Thank you, Ms. Conover, and I'll echo that as well. This was a big push and a big mountain for our district to climb over. And I'm a parent as well, so I'm in it every day with my child, and I'm in it every day at work in multiple classrooms. And every single teacher that I have seen is putting 110% into their day. I've already gotten on class Zoom calls and tried to help parents screen share and figure out how to get their kids things submitted. So we are in this together, and thank you to the parents, and thank you to administration, and thank you to all of our staff who are getting our kids through this time. That's the end of the education items. So I will turn this over to Ms. Wilt to finish out this meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Brace. I echo all of those sentiments as well. Thank you, everyone. At this time, if there are any comments from the public on non-agenda items, please raise your hand so we can call on you. Seeing none go up, I will ask if there is any old business to come before the board. Seeing none, any new business? Seeing none, I take a motion to adjourn the Education Committee meeting.
I make a motion.
First motion by Mrs. Conover. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Brace. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right, I would like to call to order the Building Committee of the Whole meeting. Purpose of this meeting is to review the approval of a PA CoStarz contract. Mr. Parker, any comments?
No comments.
Any comments from the public on agenda items? Seeing no hands, I will pass it over to Jen for the presentation of the CoStarz contract.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'm not actually going to present the CoStarz contract. Mr. Smith will, but we have had an emergency issue at Robb Middle School dealing with our water pipes. And so Mr. Smith, yet again, is dealing with another repair in a rather old building. So Mr. Smith, it's all yours.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Tonight, I'm requesting board approval of a PA CoStarz state contract with J. Ribnick Mechanical Contractor Incorporated of 1087 State Route 2035 Nicholson, PA 18446 for the domestic water piping emergency repairs at Robb Middle School for the amount of $206,100. This will be funded from the 2020-2021 facilities budget. The agreement and insurance provisions have been reviewed and approved by the district solicitor and our insurance advisors, and was discussed at the October 1st building co-chair meeting. I recommend this item be considered as an action item at the regular board meeting on October 22nd, 2020.
Any questions from my fellow board members? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move this forward to the monthly board meeting?
So
moved.
Moved by Audrey, and do I have a second?
Second.
Lisa Conover.
And seconded by Ms. Johnson Watts. All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor to move this forward?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right,
All right. Are there any comments from the public on non-agenda items? Seeing no hands, is there any old business to come before the building committee? Any new business or grass catcher? Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Ms. Wilt,
Second.
is there a second? Ms. Johnson
Second.
Watts? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and that ends our meeting and all of our meetings for the evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.